Wonderful. Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome to our monthly Zoom drop-in with Chicago Hyde Park Village. I am very pleased to welcome back Patricia Morse, who needs very little introduction to most of us gathered here. Hyde Park Trish is a Hyde Park blogger and a historian and storyteller who is fascinated by the transformations in her own neighborhood of Hyde Park, Chicago. Trish has a PhD from the University of Chicago. After teaching American Studies and Literature at Union College, St. Lawrence University, and Michigan State University, she returned to Hyde Park, where she has served on the Executive Council of the Hyde Park-Kenwood Community Conference, the Hyde Park Garden Fair, and the Hyde Park Used Book Sale. Trish authors a monthly history column in the Hyde Park Herald, and maintains a couple websites, which I'm going to put those links in the chat as well. Patricia-morse.com and patriciamorse.substack.com for those of us watching the recording and don't have access to our Zoom chat. But yeah, if I could also kindly ask everyone to mute themselves, and Trish prefers that if we go through our presentation today, and then we'll hold some time at the end for any questions or discussion. So Trish, thank you so much again for being here with Chicago Hyde Park with the Village. Welcome back, and I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me to talk about Hyde Park's urban renewal. This is, as some people know, it went on for decades. It took down over 1,000 buildings. It displaced thousands of people, and was really pretty intense a project. It's also been studied a lot because it had a unique outcome. So I have my own individual theory about what caused that unique outcome. But yeah, hopefully I do justice to it all. Oops. There, I need to use the arrows, as it turns out. Okay, so first of all, I want to talk about how Hyde Park developed, because how it developed is why urban renewal went where it went. So first of all, why are we even here? There was a trail between the Potawatomi villages. That's where the military road was created when they got rid of the indigenous people so that they could do real estate and speculation. A guy named Watson bought a farm, started a tavern, and that's where the arrow on the left is. When Paul Cornell heard that the railroad was coming, he bought Watson's Tavern. And when the railroad showed up, he said, I will give you land for the tracks if you let me have a passenger station at Watson's Tavern. And they said, yes. So that's 53rd Street. And it's been the commercial district since the 1850s. And that's why the oldest structure in Hyde Park is actually near 53rd Street. The next two steps were, the next one was 47th. There were really rich guys with really big estates, and they were commuting up to their offices. So they had a little flag stop at 47th. And then the next one was 57th, where the train would stop to refuel. It was called Woodpile at first. And that's why there are 1860s houses right near 57th and Dorchester. So the land that the railroad got was wider than the tracks. And so Lake Park was actually owned by the railroad. It wasn't part of Hyde Park Village. And it provided a bunch of economic opportunities. It had freight concerns. It had livery stables. And it was outside the village district. So the village was dry. So there were saloons and casinos on Lake Park. So there were a lot of entrepreneurial opportunities on Lake Park and Harper. So there's a Black community that forms that's quite substantial. It's middle class. It's got a big AME church on Lake Park. They have the Colored Republican Club and a social column in the Chicago Defender because it was that recognized. So that is a long-standing tradition in the neighborhood. The 1880s was the next transformation. The cable car came down, the cable car came down Cottage Grove to get people to the Washington Park racetrack. And then when the South Park Commission developed the north end of Jackson Park, the cable car went out 55th, which was empty land at the time, came down Harper, and then it had to make a loop because of how the cable car ran under the pavement. And so it came down, and they created their own private little street called Cable Court to form the loop and go back up on Lake Park. So this was an opportunity for a real estate speculator. A guy named Bennett developed a little wooden housing project for workers' cottages. So that's what's on Ridgewood Court, Dorchester, 54th Place is, these worker cottages. And it was an opportunity because they could take the cable car and to the work, to anywhere there was, cheap, reliable transportation. So these people were primarily Irish Catholics going to St. Thomas, and a Swedish community that was going to a Swedish language Methodist church and the Swedish language Lutheran church. So the next big transformation across the whole South Side is, of course, the World's Fair. They're accommodating millions of guests. So what we get are these big hotels near transportation nodes. So the ones west of the track are sort of lower class, cheaper. There's the big one that was at 53rd and Lake Park, and there's kind of a row of them on 55th along the cable car on the east end, and on the east end of 57th. West of the tracks, you get the luxury hotels, and these were grand. They were suites, and they were what they call residential hotels. So you could stay a long time, and you would have maid service, concierge, fine dining, and that transformed after World War I into a nationally famous hotel district. So that's where you get, the Schwerlin, the Del Prado, the Windermere, the Chicago Beach. After the fair, one of the main things you got left was abandoned concession stands. There were 18 of them. They were on the north and south side of 57th Street, east of the tracks, and then wrapping around onto Stony. And you had a lot of empty, between people leaving after the fair and a depression, there's a lot of cheap rentals. So the art colony forms. The second person to move into one of the concession stands is Thorsten Veblen, who's an iconoclastic writer who came to the university. The concession stands quite often get called the art colony. Pretty solidly to Dorchester and then scattering over to Kenwood. The epicenter of it was the Cable Court, was this place where the trolleys came. And there was a cast iron horse trough there that was, a remarkable feature, which will show up again later. West of them is the Professors. So Marshall Field bought a whole bunch of land from 55th to 59th as real estate speculation. He gave 10 acres to the university. He sold another 10 acres to the university, and then he made a killing selling plots to the incoming faculty who were very well paid. So that's why you have this whole stretch of domestic architecture built in about 15 years from University Avenue to, well, basically Blackstone. They called themselves South Park a long time, so I have a tendency to call it South Park in lieu of a better term. So in the 20th century, you then get to the racial, well, it becomes very white. So you have the Great Migration coming after World War I. The numbers are still not enormous, but you get the 1919 riots to our north and west. And in the middle of the riot, we weren't that affected in Hyde Park, except that some bombs were thrown to Black-owned residences near Cottage Grove and 51st. And the Defender thinks it was the protective associations dominated by real estate interests. And what was definitely true is the real estate interests were blanketing the neighborhood with flyers, telling everybody they'd be better off, much better off if they left. And it worked. So the Black population actually drops in the 20s. There's also a huge Klan presence in Hyde Park. There's a Klan presence across the South Side, but we actually have the publication. There's Dawn is publishing on 55th Street. Membership in the Klan is anonymous, but the 55th Street merchants were all advertising in Dawn. So it obviously seemed an acceptable thing to be doing. But there was a publication called Tolerance that publishes on 52nd Street. It's Catholic, it's outing Klan members. And as they get outed, the Klan quickly dissolves. It is a step too far, apparently. So in the background here, I've got the Sisson Hotel. Harry Sisson actually advertises when it opens that if you stay there, you won't encounter a Black person, that no one is hired, no person of color is hired for the Sisson Hotel. He outs himself when he hosts the Imperial Wizard at a big reception. And that is bad enough that his business plummets and he has to sell, and it is renamed the Sherry. And then, of course, now it's known as the Hampton House. What also comes out of the 20s is the restricted covenants. These are attached to deeds. They prevent people from selling or renting to primarily people of color, but other categories that the Klan hates. And the university is schizophrenic. It's both always allowed Black students, and it has promoted these restricted covenants through Hyde Park, Kenwood, south of Washington Park, Woodlawn, and the Defender is, pointing this out strongly in its pages. So you get a character like Catherine Dunham, who's a bachelor's from the university. She has a dance troupe downtown in the Fine Arts Building. They are told they would be better off if they left. And so she brings the Black dance troupe to the art colony where they will be safe and protected. So there's this little enclave that holds on. A lot of people have written about the urban renewal. Peter Rossi is one that, though he points to the different outcome in Hyde Park as coming from the fact Hyde Park went into urban renewal very organized. And primarily the early organization is the Hyde Park Cooperative Society. It comes out of the art colony. It's very left. Paul Douglas, who's a left-leaning economist, is one of the founders. It's not just the grocery store that old-timers remember. It's anything that the neighborhood needs. So it's a nexus of community activity. So backing up a little, we got the University of Chicago. So in the 1890s, of course, the university comes. William Rainey Harper is the first president, and he's got a problem, which is the first University of Chicago failed financially miserably. Also, the basis for the current University of Chicago is a bunch of Baptist theological seminaries coming out of Morgan Park. So he needs money. He, of course, has John D. Rockefeller, the Baptist, but Rockefeller's money comes with strings, which is he insists that there be matching funds from Chicago donors to prove the viability of the school. So Harper needs donors, he needs students, he needs revenue, and he hits on this brand new thing he knows about from Yale, which is university on his shoulders. And he says, we will succeed if you have a winning athletic program, because people who are not Baptists, people who are not interested in, higher education will become fans of the team and root for us and want to support us. It will also attract students. And the nature of the school is radically different for its first 40 years. It's a commuter school. They only build a few dorms. So it's Chicago school. People are coming on the cable cars. They're staying in the hotel rooming houses that are in Hyde Park. And football is big for Hyde Park. It brings in 58,000 people at its peak on a Saturday. They're eating in the restaurants. They're buying stuff. They're dancing in the Trianon. And there's this huge frat culture. And there's a lot of businesses that are supporting, the kind of fine tailoring and various things that the frat socializing has, until Robert Maynard Hutchins shows up. So part of Harper's vision all along was this graduate program. So he has very fancy faculty. He's very powerful graduate programs. They're not self-supporting. They need the undergraduate tuition in order to survive, but this is an important part of the university, and they don't like this whole Big Ten thing. So in comes Hutchins. He's their guy. He says, yeah, no, the university isn't a Chicago school. Chicago, the university is compared to Oxford and Cambridge. And they start changing the undergraduate curriculum, and that ruins the ability of athletes to be eligible to play. They're slowly killing off the sports. People don't notice, so you don't have to fight people very hard, but they are no longer recruiting in the high schools. Particularly a big recruiting was going on from Hyde Park High. So they're cutting themselves off from Chicago. And then in 1940, he makes it official. Everybody, like the Cubs and the White Sox, everybody keeps dreaming next year will be better. And then in 1940, he says, yeah, never going to be better. We're pulling out of the Big Ten. And there's howls of dismay. The alumni are so upset. The thing they loved about the university is gone, and they walk away. So they aren't getting the donations. They implement the full Hutchins plan, which is pretty wild. And there are people who love it, but it's a more limited number. And so the population of the undergraduate is dropped from 5,000 to 1,200, and half the students who enroll in the 40s drop out. So they don't have the tuition revenue. They're surviving by pulling money out of the endowment. So they go into urban renewal in serious financial trouble, but they blame the neighborhood for their enrollment problems, which, with some reason. So they're often accused of drumming up fears, but I think the evidence is there really was really high crime in Hyde Park. But the biggest thing you can look at is that there were this very bad real estate behavior going on. One is, there was a shortage of housing after the war in general. And of course, there's this big in-migration from the South into Bronzeville that's pushing straining the housing market everywhere. But what you have is these old hotels that have not been maintained because of the 30s and lack of material during the war. They're crowding like whole families into single rooms. So they're very crowded. They're also taking the big six flats in the more luxurious areas and converting them to 24 apartments. So they're apartments that don't even have plumbing. They are illegal conversions. They aren't remotely safe. There are some bad fires. And the population is climbing over 60,000. The businesses are struggling. There's no parking, but it's still white, primarily white. But it's not going to stay white. In 1948, the restrictive covenants are declared illegal by the Supreme Court. So a group of people start meeting, and they eventually form the Hyde Park-Kenwood Community Conference. The HPKCC, as you could tell from the introduction, I am very aware of it. It's on my radar. But I think it's a mistake that it gets written out of most of the histories about urban renewal, because I think it was extremely important both in keeping people committed to the community, willing to stick it out. The white residents who, many other communities, of course, they're fleeing. And it's where Black leadership and the Black community is exerting its agency. So it's a problem that it gets written out. One of the people at the early days is Early Dickerson. He is, of course, the president of Supreme Life. He's also the lead lawyer of Hansberry v. Lee. So he's been fighting restrictive covenants for a long time. And he ends up moving into 48th and, near 48th and Drexel. It's the churches, it's like the Quakers, the Unitarians, the KAM Isaiah, the Young Socialists, the Cooperative Society. It's labeled as a bit left, but it's also just how do you end up with a nice place to live? This is the goal. They're going to try to have it be integrated. They don't have a model for this. There aren't integrated communities. So this is an experiment. And they're volunteers. So they are latching onto the block clubs, which is coming out of the Black community. It was an Urban League thing from the Great Migration. So what you do is you organize the block. There are over 60 of them at its peak. And you have an agenda for them. One is to keep an eye on the block for these illegal conversions and also the block busting, but also to fix up the neighborhoods. It's really run down, and you have things like planting trees on the parkways. This is where you get the garden fair, trying to provide plants for people to beautify their neighborhood. And it's to form community so that when there's a new neighbor, you reach out and you say, hey, want to come to the block club? One of the things they're really trying to do is avoid the violence that's happening in neighborhoods around. There's some bricks through windows. There's some sporadic things, but they really managed to avoid that interracial violence. So that's the kind of thing that's happening, and a grassroots. Oh, so I should have said that. So one of the things going on is if you saw that there was illegal conversions going on, you could report it to HPKCC, and volunteer lawyers would take them to court. In the Herald every week, there's a list of buildings that is being taken to court. But there's other things that people just tried to solve problems. So Ross Peterson was writing to me, and I had just been reading about his mother, Eleanor, and they were saying that this is what it was like on his block. So Black residents, Black people who wanted to be residents couldn't get mortgages. So there was a thing in order to institute, white flight that these real estate guys were doing, because they were making money hands over fist with white flight. They would give a contract to a Black family, expensive, but also if they missed a payment at all, they lost everything and they would then be thrown out. And so a Black family got moved in with one of these contracts and started to struggle, and the block found out about it and passed the hat so that they could stay and beat the manipulation. What the real estate company was doing was calling everybody at dinner hour day after day and saying, oh, there's a Black family on your block, you have to flee, you'll lose all the value of your house if you don't sell it to us. So there was a lot of pressure, and they realized that they needed to find a way for people to get regular, nice mortgages and get out of this manipulation. So Eleanor Peterson, with the advice from Earl B. Dickerson, who lived down the block, and Paul Berger, they form the Hyde Park Federal Savings and Loan to provide mortgages and to provide some rehab money as urban renewal rolls through. Because if you could rehab your house, you have a chance of saving it from the wrecker. So they had to raise $1 million, but it had to be smaller donations, and they do it through the Cooperative Society, and they get 750 donors, and they're able to open the Federal Savings and Loan. In 1952, you get the Southeast Chicago Commission. There's lots of sort of versions of this, but it's really clear when you read the university publications that, this is the university. It's half funded by the university, half by a grant the university gets. And Julian Levy actually says in a university publication, SECC is the political wing of the university. Kimpton is now president. Why 1952? Well, they had to wait for Hutchins to leave. Hutchins is just paralyzed by the situation, and he leaves. In comes Kimpton. He finds out what the finances are. He says, the university may literally not survive. So they think in order to attract students and young faculty, they're going to have to change the neighborhood. So the meetings they hold are all about the crime and, doing safety and producing stability in the neighborhood. But they are going to change the neighborhood to attract, their economics they see is based on undergraduate tuitions. They want 10,000 students. They're getting 1,200. So how do you get white suburban students? Well, you create the neighborhood to be a suburb. What is a suburb? Low density of population, low-rise buildings, minimal commercial presence, middle class, modern, and as we will see, they want to keep it as wide as possible, particularly near campus. So they don't have any money. So they're doing this with other people's money. They're doing this with government money, developers' money, grants, anything they can find. So the first thing they do is there's a federal act called the Blighted Areas Redevelopment Act, and you can tap into this money if you can prove you got blight. They don't want to clear cut. So there's already urban renewal happening to the north. It's run by IIT, Michael Reese Hospital and Marshall Field, and they're just clear cutting the neighborhood. They're not picking and choosing, but the university says, no, we just want to get rid of the blight. So they have an architect go through the whole neighborhood and identify buildings, and they select this. It's Hyde Park A. Hyde Park B is just not contiguous. It's up by Blackstone and 54th. And they go to the feds and they say, oh, well, the black buildings are dilapidated. And they probably were. The ones down here on Lake Park, those were built in the 1880s before there was even a fire code. They've been the artist colony. They're probably not maintained. And the 55th Street ones are those old hotels from built fast for the fair. But then there are the gray buildings. And I have questions. Like this one, I don't know if you can see my pointer. Maybe I can, well, never mind. Anyway, this one's the Deco Arts building that's on the corner of 55th and Lake Park. It looks pretty good. It's full of business. How bad were these gray buildings? And there's another one, which is the bank, Bank Financial, University Bank. So how bad were these? They were saved, these two were saved by flukes. They were supposed to survive. And how the land clearance worked was they would condemn a building. They would buy the property at fair market rate through eminent domain. That is, the owners had no choice. They'd tear it down, and then they'd sell it to approved developers. So then they'd get replacement money to go and buy the next set of buildings. So it's a rolling process. The people, there are lots of pictures of people staring at this particular map, trying to understand what's happening. And people understood it as eliminating dilapidated buildings and engineering a healthy neighborhood. And people were, it was a lot of change, but people were pretty on board, And house to be torn down. So they're interviewed a lot. And they had one of these little worker cottages. They had renters on the third floor and in the basement. He's an insurance guy, a GI, and an ex-GI. They're both involved in the HPKCC. So they're buying into this vision that, okay, we're going to make a new, nice place to live. So they tell people, they got a good price. They, they're on board with the vision of the new community. So when they have a celebration, Julian Levy, Richard J. Daley, and Lawrence Kimpton have a celebration that they're tearing down a house. They say, oh, and the Sislers will be here. And they write into the Herald and they say, oh, no, we're not happy you're tearing down our house, but, we're willing to do it. Oops. So as I said, it rolls on. So the first demolitions start happening in 1954, and the art colony goes down, and it's replaced with these expensive townhouses. So you have dozens of apartments disappearing and turning into, like in this case, 8 townhouses. So the density drops pretty fast. HPKCC is in this committee with SECC and the university, and they say, well, what's happening? What's happening with all these people that are being displaced? And the thing is, the university says, well, these 43% of people in this class moved every 2 years anyway, so it doesn't matter. They'll find somewhere else to live. They aren't going to make affordable housing. So people are generally concerned but on board until you get to some of the fights. And one of the big fights, and of course they have nowhere, it's eminent domain, they have no ground to argue with, is the creation of what is eventually named Nichols Park. The part of what's going on is the Land Clearance Commission is relying on the expertise of urban planners from the university. And they have theories, that they're justifying a lot of change. So they say, well, there should be a park within half a mile of everyone. So this is a park. And as you can tell, a lot of the buildings are little white squares, which means they are perfectly good shape. A lot of them were like these little apartment buildings. And it's the Catholics, it's the Swedes still, but it's half the population is now not white. And most of them are Japanese Americans who they were in the internment camps. They were not allowed to leave to go back to the West Coast. So they came to Chicago, and this is where the Buddhist temple is. And it's, as I said, nearly 50% of the people being displaced here. So for the second time, the government is basically ruining their lives, breaking up their communities. So these meetings are really raucous and unhappy, and of course don't go anywhere because it's eminent domain. But the business guys at first are really hopeful because they think they will be in the shopping center. And people, the 55th is an urban canyon. It's very tall, it's very dark from all the coal soot. And after the war in the 50s, people don't want old things. They want modern. So everybody's kind of excited about the shopping center until the businesses start to find out that they don't fit. And Jane Jacobs, who's writing Life and Death of the American Cities while this is going on, includes Hyde Park. And she points out that the original way is it's organic commercial development, depending on what the community actually wants and needs. But if you have a monopoly, like a shopping center, it's dictated by a single entity. And in this case, they had to get a mortgage and they had to have chains in order to get the mortgage. So that's why what fit was Woolworths and Walgreens and Fannie Mae and Wimpy's. Yeah, the victims that don't get talked about as much is the retail. So 641 businesses just disappear. If you were renting as a family, you got some money to move. You got nothing if you were a business and renting. And so it's a big wipeout of a lot of people's neighbors, a lot of people's livelihoods. And as I said, it's a rolling process as things come down, as the land clearance, buys something, redoes it, gets new money, and moves on. So this starts getting quite unhappy. Meanwhile, this urban development to the north has pushed thousands of people into other housing markets. And so this is a map done by Saul Tax, and he's giving a paper. He's an anthropologist. He's giving a paper in 1957. And so you can see the pattern of how the neighborhood is changing. It's on the edges. It's on Cottage Grove. Oh, the red is non-white. The green is white. So it's Cottage Grove, course, 47th, coming in along 51st. East of the tracks stays very white and stays very white after urban renewal kind of is wrapping up. And those are the hotels. It's fairly untouched. What happens, though, is the FHA comes in and pressures everybody to turn into apartment buildings. And so they aren't hotels anymore. If they refuse, basically the university buys them. So they got the Piccadilly, they got the Broadview, they got Shoreland. And then down in South Park to the east of campus is, white, because that's the faculty and they're white and they're staying there. What the university is concerned about is these blocks that are not white right by campus. And so they get another law. They go down to Springfield and they get the Illinois Urban Community Conservation Act of 1953, which the governmental entity is the Community Conservation Council. And there's three parts of the law I decided to pull out because that's what I think it explains things to me. Is the idea of the law is, well, first of all, it's a private entity. It's not the government. But they are determining that the thing that they're tackling might turn into blight. They don't have to prove that there's blight now. They have to have a plan, of its redevelopment. And the goal is that they are restoring community pride and they'll have block rehabilitation efforts in the respective areas. And so the people who live, so the first target is that's right by campus. And these people will say, wait, our buildings are fine. They're not in bad shape. We have very organized block clubs demonstrating this community pride and self-help. The only thing that seems to be going on is it's not white, and it's Japanese Americans and African Americans. And so there's this really bitter lawsuit. And when you look at the people who are part of the lawsuit, in particular, one of the leads is St. Clair Drake, and the lawyer is Michael Hagawara. They live in the area. St. Clair Drake is a PhD from the university. He's a professor at Roosevelt, and he's just written The Black Metropolis. He's the one pictured in the middle. And one of the other residents, of course, is a lawyer. This seems to be very middle class. So this is one of the things I was asking myself as I did this is the defender and others accuse this process of being Negro removal. And was that true? Well, parts of it were true. It's hard to justify what this is. And the plan was a elaborate, the substitution that they were going to make is an elaborate married student housing development designed by Erno Saarinen. They had no money. So yeah, not only did it not happen, I'm not sure even then they thought it would happen. So there's a second one of these corporations, Northwest Hyde Park Redevelopment Corporation, which is Woodlawn to Cottage, 51st to 55th. And this is just a big mess. It's not as consistent a narrative as the other one. The Herald at one point says there are 200 groups and block clubs involved in the arguments and discussions. And there is at one point 600 buildings marked for demolition, but some of them are getting rehab loans from the savings and loans. So they're pulling their buildings back out of contention. The university for a while wants to take over 55th to 54th Ingleside and Drexel for a research institute, but those block clubs push back hard. And so what the university itself settles for is simply a buffer. They tear down 55th, they build the berms, which were originally really high, and they put Stagg Field in on, between campus and those blocks. One of the ugly fights is over the Lutheran school. That block club really didn't want to go down. So that dragged on for a long time. Meanwhile, what the university does do is, with some money, is buy buildings, and they particularly buy 51st Street, buildings along 51st Street, some of these hotels too, but mostly 51st Street. And they, where it was starting to change, and they put in faculty, staff, married students, and graduate students. And of course, these are all white. So they're just saying, oh yeah, they just happen to be white. But they also have black students, and the black students try to rent and they are denied. They are told there's no room, and then white students right after them are shown rooms. So they go to the Congress of Racial Equality, which is led by Bernie Sanders. And they try to talk to the university and they won't talk to them. So they occupy the administration building. And finally, to get them to leave, they admit, yes, the university is redlining the buildings, and Beadle is forced to say they're doing it to prevent white flight. They're doing it to protect the university. Ann Daly, so one of the puzzles I had was why was Daly's commissions and things really working with the university? We were not really popular with Richard J. Daly. Hirsch had the answer, which is that there were members of the board who went to Daley and said, we will donate money to your political campaign if you let the university do their urban renewal. And he said, sure. And then he expands it. So he gives them, an expanded role up to 47th, and then they're pushing into Woodlawn. And of course, famously, Woodlawn pushes back, and there's a protracted battle, but there's a truce, and the university stops at 61st Street. So, as I say, I am impressed with the fact that people were trying to have agency and trying to control some of what they want in this new neighborhood that's forming. It's not just things imposed. And one of them is Kimbark Plaza. So 15 of the displaced businesses pool their resources. They form a cooperative. They get permission through the land clearance people to have a plaza. And I think one reason they make it through is these are the kind of businesses a suburb needs. But people are, in there plugging for the businesses they want to go to. So Anderson Hardware has to move 3 times as 55th Street keeps being demolished. And one of the times they weren't given enough warning, and their customers actually turn out, load up the shopping carts with everything that's in the store and move Anderson Hardware because they want their hardware store. The other thing like that is Harper Court, where there's this real sense of loss because the artist colony goes fast, and people, it's not just supporting the arts. This is an area of people of good restaurants. It's a place where people like going to the stores. And there was a real sense that this was a loss. And so there's a committee bands together. I'm sure part of its success in getting through the red tape is that Muriel Beadle was the lead. They get small business administration loans, but a big percentage of it is financed by hundreds of Hyde Parkers who give money to try to have this replacement of the things they've lost. It's nonprofit. It underwrites the rents for artist cooperatives, artist supply stores, but it's too late. The concession stands get torn down in 1963, and about the only thing that survives from the concession stands is the fret shop. Coming in from 55th after many moves, another survivor is Akasa. And to indicate that this is an ode to the lost art colony, they bring the horse trough from the cable court, and it sits in the corner of Harper Court, pretty much treated as a planter. It's a very odd looking planter. I always wondered what it was. I was glad to find out. Harper Court, I think, is more than the sum of the stores and restaurants. It really was a community square and a very healing place for the community that had been through a lot. So there's, coming out of urban renewal, there's a new Hyde Park. Populations in the 20,000s. It does integrate. It is balanced about 35% Black, 45% white for decades. It is not evenly distributed population, but it does work. There's a lot of local landowners, so there's still affordable spaces for some people. So there's still a sense some of that lingers. And 70% of the university faculty and staff live in the area. A lot of community organizations come out of the urban renewal era, but there is this lingering bitterness towards the U of C that if I say to somebody I'm doing urban renewal, they quite often will say back to me, oh, Negro removal. And there's a sense that something important was lost. And they changed the neighborhood and the enrollment stayed low. So in the aughts, in the new millennium, the university decided to do another big push to build up the undergraduate tuitions. So they did huge construction projects on campus. They have international studies. They got rid of almost everything. That was the Hutchins plan. And they decided to once more change the neighborhood. And their argument is it was blighted. So there's the TIF comes in, and that's a tax increment organization. And the taxes are supposed to go to schools, parks, and to deal with blight. And so the university buys everything they can inside the TIF, and they tear down the blight of Harper Court. They tear down a lot of other things. They build the fancy hotels, the restaurants, the kinds of things that they think well-heeled parents will like. And of course, they bring in some chains that look like the kinds of things that are comforting, like Target. Um, and the university is once more in financial difficulty, so it's making some decisions based on that. But one of the huge differences, the faculty, staff, and administrators don't live in Hyde Park anymore. It's down to close to 10%, as far as I can tell. So we're in the new Hyde Park. We don't know quite where we're going. Lots of Mac. A lot of the real estate is owned by New Jersey corporations. There's the university building innovation centers, and of course, there's the ongoing suggestion that the Obama Center is going to make a difference. Although I suspect the biggest difference is going to be Woodlawn and South Shore. And that's the end of my talk.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Trish. Very interesting. Certainly pleased to, I see a lot of applause on the screen there. Happy to open it up to any questions, thoughts, comments. So you're welcome to unmute yourselves if you would like, or raise your hand using the Zoom's built-in functions, or you can type something in the chat if you'd like. So yeah, opening it up.
Well, I just want to say it's both fascinating and disturbing.
Yes. Yeah, I was trying not to be too down at the end, because it is like, whoa, it's changing again, but no, might be good.
Cool. I have some questions for you. I grew up in one of those townhouse developments that was developed by I.M. Pei.
Yeah.
One of the original my parents bought. And I think that you've talked to someone who I'm working with. We're doing some investigation about that area and how Black people got mortgages there, and how that very interesting block was very, very integrated. In fact, I was interested to hear you say about Japanese families. We had Japanese families, we had survivors of the Holocaust, we had German families, and all together on that block. And I'm wondering if you've heard anything about how the university might have been involved in populating some of the buildings or the development that was done in those areas.
Well, I think I had to trim a lot out. So at one point, I did pause on that slide that showed the townhouses and say that they were the most integrated part of Hyde Park, which was, so they were actually a good thing. They were expensive, and so I think the university was conceding that if, as long as people were our kind of people. I mean, one of the things they said about the poor whites they were displacing is they don't read, they're not our people. So I think some of it was, well, okay, this is okay. But the decision making at that point is actually Webb and Knapp is the developer. They're the ones who decided who could, how they were selling the units. And as I said, there is now, by the time they were opening up, which is the 60s, the savings and loan was going. And so there was more availability of mortgages.
Yeah, that's interesting. My parents' mortgage was through Tallman.
Yeah, Tallman actually, I have an ad. I want to research Tallman. So yeah, I have a promotional pamphlet from Tallman from the early 60s where they're promoting Hyde Park and promoting it as a place for people to move. So they were obviously engaged in this. Yeah. But I don't, other than that, I bumped into that promotional pamphlet. I don't know, they're.
I can remember personal experience. About 1958, some resistors were formulating the motto, black and white together, shouldering out the poor.
Yes, that actually, I had a slide about that, but I was trying to trim it down so it'd be faster. That actually is, what? Yeah, this was actually Richard Orlikoff claims to have originated that saying, and what happened because Mike Nichols and Elaine May, who had been at the Compass Players, had left to New York and become extremely rocketed to fame, and they asked him to come back for a fundraiser for the IVI IPO. And when they got back, they said, well, we're going to do our standard routine, but we need a local joke. So they talked to Richard Orlikoff, who was the lawyer for Compass Players, and said, what's a local joke? And so he claims he's the one that came up with, it was black and white, shoulder and shoulder, united against the lower classes. I think it kind of skews the understanding that there were different forces fighting each other, but it stuck because it felt like some of that was what was going on, But yeah, it's a Mike Nichols and Elaine May joke. It fell over like a lead balloon, though. The Herald actually reported on it and said there was some nervous laughter and there wasn't much reaction. It was everybody's like, oh, and there's gasping. It was a little too on the nose.
Too true to be comfortable.
Yeah.
I see Susan has her hand up.
Okay. I've long thought that we should have more memorials of some of our history. For example, in Harper Court, one of the little branches of one of those streets should be renamed Eleanor Peterson Way. Because what she did was significant and a major part of our history. And that's just one example. I think there should be more of that kind of thing around our neighborhood to remind us of our history, both the bad and the good.
Yeah, I mean, even as much as I've been digging and I've been puttering at urban renewal for a while because it's so huge. And I just came across her name very, very late, just before Ross Peterson, her son, wrote in, and she's kind of forgotten, and that's bad.
She was also the founder of what is now called Forefront, which was what was the original name? It was the major not-for-profit advisory, a donors forum.
Yes. Yeah, no, she was quite an agent of change. Yeah. Yeah, I think Muriel Beadle gets remembered more because she actually wrote memoirs.
Right.
Richard, see your hands up, please.
Yeah, I'm new to the group here. Just the quickest of introductions. I'm a Hyde Park native. I have been fortunate to get on the mailing list for Hyde Park Village. I'm running senior centers in New York City right now, and I get back to Hyde Park as often as I can. The personal perspectives I would bring, and I think a lot about Hyde Park urban renewal. It was happening around me. I was learning the world at that time, and it also impacted my family very directly. My father had a business on the east side of Lake Park, which was just totally clear cut there. And to this day, I don't completely understand the reasons for moving Lake Park and taking out the east side of Lake Park. My sense is it had something to do with wanting to build a suburban style shopping center. And the price of that was clear cutting Lake Park from 47th to 57th. Maybe true, maybe not. I think some of those style questions of what was being developed in Hyde Park are probably in there along with who should the people be who still get to live in Hyde Park. I think in different ways, they're still part of the same puzzle. My father's business survived all of that, relocated elsewhere in Hyde Park, but at the cost of what seemed to me unusual levels of unnecessary stress, and probably what turned me into a political person for the rest of my life. And
yeah, I think Lake Park had been a thorn in the university side for many, many, many decades because it was where the bars were, and they were trying to get those closed down. They were fighting against it. So I think some of it was emotional, but it's very noticeable. One of the things they did was make changes that forced all of the trolley system out of Hyde Park. I mean, the trolley system itself failed pretty soon, but it was cutting off Hyde Park from that transit, that cheap available transit, I think. I'm having a really hard time trying to figure out why they built Monoxide Island. I can't find rationale, but one of the things it absolutely did was kill off the trolley. Trolley couldn't wrap around it. So I think Lake Park was a couple things, was to very efficiently get rid of all of the Turkish baths and bars and things that were on it, and that they didn't like.
And took out quite a few good businesses at the same time.
Oh yes. Yeah. Oh yeah.
It sure did.
When did they get rid of all the bars on 55th Street?
Oh, when they leveled it.
Yeah, what year was that though?
Well, it was a rolling process, but it was across the 50s pretty much. Yeah.
Between about 1962 to 65.
Well, I can speak to that too. I'm one of those people that the university recruited to make Hyde Park more suburban. I grew up in Philadelphia, a nice little Quaker girl from Philadelphia, applied to the university in the fall of 1958 to come in 1959. And I'm not quite sure how, being a little girl from Philadelphia, I found out about the University of Chicago, but I did somehow. And as soon as I applied, the university flew me and my parents out and put us up, I think, at the Quad Club. Urban renewal was well enough underway at that point that Hyde Park looked like a war zone. And the university bent over backwards to convince my parents that this was a safe place to send their dear little one from Philadelphia. I have always told people that I was part of a recruitment to raise the undergraduate enrollment. Never knew I was a pawn in the urban renewal racial game, but very early on, the urban renewal landscape in Hyde Park was our playground as undergraduates. I remember climbing over rubble in what became Nichols Park to get to the Hyde Park Theater that was on the old Lake Park Avenue with the hostess and all the rest. I remember going to the bars along 55th Street. The Compass was still there, and University Tap was still there across the street from it, but they were the last two, and this would have been in 1960, 1961. But at the same time, even though I was oblivious in those ways, right from the start, somehow I picked up the vibe that the university and the community were at odds with one another, and I sided with the community for whatever reason. Anyway, Trish, I learned a great deal from what you said. I thought I knew some stuff, but nothing like what you have presented. Thank you so much.
Trish, was there a Korean community in Hyde Park?
I haven't, but there was some diversity. There was like a Filipino comes in. I haven't bumped into a particular Korean community, like a temple or I haven't bumped into it. Haven't actually overtly looked, but in my reading I haven't. Yeah, not the Japanese American community was actually pretty big. Some people might remember a long-lasting store was called Franklin's. That lasted a long time. It was a Japanese American store.
Cornell Florist was also Japanese.
Oh yeah, they were. Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
Alan Rose owned it. And the interesting thing is, they bought the business from Charlie, who was a German Jew who had concentration camp marks on his arm. So I grew up in Hyde Park, and when I worked there as a grammar school kid, there was this two groups of people represented in this business. One was Japanese American who'd been interned in California, and then Charlie.
Yeah, come on in. Come on in. Okay. Eric.
About Chinese.
Well, I see.
Oh, I see Dottie had a question in chat.
Dottie, oh, please. Oh, I didn't.
Oh, well, it's two big ones. It's Mac and Ivy.
Oh, okay.
What was the question? I don't, I think she might
in the chat. Yeah, she said, can I name the New Jersey corporations that are dominating? I mean, Mac is 5,000 rental units. They control an awful lot. Ivy is the one that bought all of the 35 university buildings. They're in financial difficulty, so they sold off all their buildings. And that's one reason why the percentage of staff and all are so much lower, because the university buildings are no longer here. They're Ivy. I don't know. They have a more formal name of some kind. I don't know what it is. But if you see a building with Ivy, it's Ivy Piccadilly, Ivy, it's that New Jersey corporation.
Okay. I didn't realize that Mac is New Jersey based. So
yeah, Antheus. Oh, I was on HPKCC when Eli Unger showed up, and he's Antheus. It's all one guy, yeah, he owns a lot somewhere in Kansas. I mean, it's a national firm.
He discovered Hyde Park.
Yeah, he did, big time.
Yeah. I'd like to hear more about other people's experiences who lived through a lot of this. And my husband would like to contribute about the Chinese population in Hyde Park.
Yeah, I arrived here on the fall of '64. At that time, I was bringing my laundry to a Chinese laundry. They were speakers of Taishan dialect. There were two takeouts as well, speakers of Taishan dialect, a kind of Cantonese. And I was wondering, in your research, had you run across any traces of those enterprises?
Well, there is this ongoing, but I think it was relatively small presence. But yeah, they're very early. Well, actually, there's a Japanese American presence in Hyde Park that starts with the fair that around in the 1890s, and they stay. There's the Japanese had a huge presence at the fair, and a bunch of them seem to have just stayed. So there was this little core for when the other people showed up from the internment camps. Yeah, so I don't think the numbers were super high, but there were so many stores, there was so much business, that I think there was quite a few, like that, of the laundries and the takeouts.
Okay.
The university, actually, Amos Alonzo Stagg had a huge connection with Japan. And so one of the features of being a baseball player for the university in the very early years, in the O's, in the 1904, is that you would go to Japan and play a Japanese team. And one reason the Japanese got into baseball was, in fact, Amos Alonzo Stagg.
Oh.
So yeah, there are weird, interesting connections that go on there.
And in those days, you did not fly to Japan.
No, it was quite a thing that, that kids got to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting.
So I see we're a little past time here, but really wonderful conversation. So I wonder if we might, out of respect for everybody's time, might wrap this up. I did see, though, Laura, did you have your hand raised? Did you want to say something?
Yes, I did. I came in the late 60s, and was very enamored of Harper Court. It was just such a special place. It was part of my deciding to come to Hyde Park was, oh, this is a cool place to be. I was really sad, and I still am, when it was demolished. We lost that gathering place, that community gathering place. And we seem to be continuing to lose the community gathering places. The 55th Street shopping center is now becoming unavailable for groups like the book fair, the garden fair, because the restaurants are moving into what was the gathering area, and the new Harper Court is not Harper Court. So I really am sad to see those changes happen. We're missing something, and the university's hand is in both of these. And I guess having lived in Hyde Park for a long time now, I'm as much community as I was university, even though I came to go to grad school.
I would like to add that I think we have only, by my count, only one independent artisan business in Hyde Park anymore. And we used to have dozens and dozens, of course, in Harper Court, but sprinkled along the business corridors. And I think the Great Frame Up is the only business of that kind, independent artisan business that we have. Pat, can you think of any others that we still have? Well, there's, I actually haven't been there, but there is an art gallery in Harper Court. So, but it hasn't been here. No, it's a new. No. The number of, we could have a wonderful session, those of us who've lived here for a long time, remembering the independent stores that we shopped at and loved, Breslauer's, all the ones in Harper Court, Cooley's Corner, Cooley's Candles, and on and on and on.
The shop that had all African things.
Yes, Boyagin's Bazaar. Other people join in.
The Fret Shop.
The Fret Shop, for sure. The flower shop that was there. Oh, and well, this isn't actually artisan, but the veterinary service that's now Hyde Park Animal Hospital did start in Harper Court with Dr. Kostecki. You probably know Tom Wake, but before Tom Wake was Dr. Kostecki, who liked animals much more than he liked people. And that business, the roots of the current Hyde Park Animal Hospital are that from Harper Court. So I guess that still remains, but so little. And as you point out, all we have are, I think you called Target a comfort place. I don't find it comforting at all. For people who are bringing their students here, bringing their kids here, there's familiar chains. Yes. So that's why, Chipotle, it's like Five Guys. It's they're familiar, Which means national brands, which means homogenization, which means we've lost our quirky character.
Trish, can I mention Plants Alive for those of us who remember back then?
Oops, I'm having slight internet problems. So
can I mention Plants Alive?
I was thinking about Plants Alive, actually. Yeah, what about Plants Alive?
When I first came here, I was working in the Loop, and often I would, at my lunch hour, I'd go looking at all the stores in the Loop for things that I needed. I couldn't find them. I came home, found it Breslauer's.
Of course.
Yeah.
We have to remember the toy store.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, it's still here. Toys Etc. is still here. Yeah.
And then
They need our support, I think, because they're going to be caught between the two big, outgrowths.
Right. But this is a reminder that we do have to support our local businesses.
Absolutely. And we all lost Freeling Pot and Pan.
Yes. Well,
around 53rd.
Yep.
Yeah.
So every time you go to buy something on Amazon, think about whether you can get it at a local store.
Don't buy it on Amazon. It's simple. Don't.
I agree. I agree. And in fact,
I don't unless I absolutely have to.
It's much less hassle often to just go to the local store and get it. You see what you want, you feel it. It's, yeah.
Right.
Pay for it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we could probably conclude this, though I'm sure we could certainly continue for a lot longer, but
well, I'll show up to some of the lunches. So if you want to talk to me when we're eating lunch,
yeah, if there's anyone
I'm
here
still working on it.
Great.
If you don't come
great.
to our monthly lunch gatherings, typically on the fourth Wednesday of the month, those are a lot of fun and a great forum for all sorts of table conversations. You'll find that on our website, chpv.org/calendar. That's an easy, quick way to see everything that's coming up. But Jack, one last comment. I see your hand is patiently raised there. Go ahead, please, Jack.
Very thrilled that a lot of us talked about community spaces that made a place for a community to form. And I want to point out that Promontory Point is exactly that for Hyde Park, and it has been for years and for many people from outside the neighborhood. And I want to thank all of the community members that have helped us try to save Promontory Point from getting destroyed by the city. We've raised over $300,000 in little tiny bits to help us do that. And I want to thank the community and everybody who's here for their support in this.
Thank you, Jack, for spearheading that.
Absolutely.
But I would also throw out another plug about community spaces. I think there's perhaps much hope in what the neighborhood club is trying to it's expanding and relaunching, and it could very well develop into the kind of community space that we've lost elsewhere. So
Yes.
I think it's worth watching and supporting.
Thanks, everyone.
And it's a survivor of urban renewal.
That's true. It's true.
It actually was built before it all started launching and was allowed to survive.
Well, huge thank you to Trish Morse for lending us your time and your expertise and that very interesting presentation. And thanks everyone for being a part of this really important, great community building conversation. So yeah, always wonderful to see everyone and to have these really important Zoom drop-ins, bringing us all together to learn and to share. So fabulous.
Great.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again,
Thank you.
Trish.
Bye.
Y'all
Bye.
take care. Wonderful having you here.